everyone, and welcome to Two Dope Black Doulas. Today, we will be talking about our journeys into feeding our children in honor of National Breastfeeding Month. We thought it would be important to highlight some of the things that we face as mothers, breastfeeding mothers in our communities. I'm Brittany Jones, and this is Danielle Watson Murray.
Hello.
Hey, hey, hey. Today we're going to talk about our journeys with feeding our babies. And so we're just going to talk about our special journeys in feeding our babies. So Danielle, do you want to start?
Sure. So, as a reminder to our extended family, so I have a 16-year-old, and I actually have twin boys. So the first journey through breastfeeding, I was 24, 25, 25. Um, my family, like my mother, pretty much breastfed me. My family's from Jamaica, and that's usually how you feed your children. And then by the time they're like 5, 6 months, probably a little bit younger, oh, they start, with porridge and with breast milk and like
Like the cereals.
the cereal,
Yeah.
all the things that the pediatricians here in the States tell you not to do. That's probably what
Right.
Caribbean and old school African American families are like. Go ahead and put that cereal. My baby's
Keep that
fine.
baby's belly full. It's like you sleep through
Right.
the night.
Exactly. Go ahead and fill it up with porridge. And you're like, they're like 2 months old. They're like, they'll be fine. So pretty much, I'm pretty sure that's how I was fed. I know that I was fed, that way. And then so I had my son. I knew I wanted to breastfeed, and he was a preemie and born at 34 weeks. So it made it very difficult because your milk is not fully in yet. And I think a lot of people have this experience where you don't know enough about lactation. They tell you like, oh, the lactation consultant will be on the floor in the hospital. So you're like, oh, good. I know what to do. You just put the nipple in the baby's mouth, and that is
Mm,
not easy. Also,
mm,
side note, the lactation consultants are really rough.
mm-hmm.
I don't know why they just I guess because they do it several times a day, but they literally are just pulling your boob out. You're already
And
getting
shoving.
close and shoving it in, and you're just like, man, I already had my insides literally spread eagle on the table. I
Right.
just got my dignity back, and here you go, just pulling my boob out. Can we have some decorum?
Right.
So I think baby and I were both a little traumatized, and he was in the NICU for a couple of days. So a lot of that bonding and that skin to skin that us doulas and just a lot of people really recommend. I was not able to do that with my first son or even my twins. So we actually my son and I only did our breastfeeding journey for about 4 or 5 months. It was not exclusive because I had to wait for my milk to come in. He had to get adjusted, so I would pump. Sometimes he would latch on, and honestly, I was just exhausted. But he was formula and breastfed, and then literally one day he just kind of like gave up. He did not want to latch anymore. I was distraught because I really wanted to breastfeed for at least a year because that's the
That's what we're
recommendation.
told. Yeah.
Exactly. So that was a little traumatizing. So I made sure that the next time I was like, even if these twins are preemies, I'm going to make sure we do skin to skin. So I pushed for that, even though they were in the NICU. The hospital was very receptive and
Mm,
respectful of it.
mm-hmm.
And I literally started pumping pretty much as soon as they came out of my womb, to try to get some colostrum.
Mm-hmm.
Brittany, do you want to tell them what colostrum is, just in case people don't know?
Yeah, so colostrum is just the for like the beginning of your milk. So it's like a little bit thinner, the liquid that comes out before your milk comes.
Right, right. All of the vitamins is packed with so many
Right.
vitamins. So we were able to do that. And, with twins, they're like, oh, are you going to tandem feed? I didn't know what tandem feeding was before this.
Mm,
So
that's
tan,
interesting
yeah,
because
so
I don't know what
tandem,
tandem feeding is. So I'm like, what is it?
what is it? So tandem feeding is basically feeding both your babies at the same time. So one on
Oh.
each boob, and sometimes it could be an older sibling because you could have a 2-year-old that's still breastfeeding and then a newborn.
That is
Um,
interesting. I
so
felt like
yeah.
so I'm gonna get into my story later on, and I don't
Mhm.
mean to interrupt yours,
No,
but I
no, go
think
ahead.
that's interesting because I know when I was like breastfeeding my son, I felt like if I couldn't get it from one boob, I could switch to the other. You know what I mean? So like
Right.
if you're
Same.
doing like one baby has one, like and the other baby has the other, like
Same.
it's no like
No
error,
real
no room for
right.
error.
It is a small margin. You're just like, I hope you're getting something because your brother's good. That was it. So I did tandem feeding, and it was wild because you just like, I just kept saying to myself, I'm literally a cow right now. Like,
Moo,
having to,
I'm a cow.
I'm a cow. Exactly how I felt the whole time. I was just like, oh my gosh. So we breastfed when my until my milk came in. So we got the colostrum for them, but I also opted for donor milk. I
Mm,
thought about it because I just
mm,
didn't want them to get used to formula yet. So we did donor milk for a little bit, and supplementing with what I was getting and what I was pumping at home. The twins were in the hospital for a little under 30 days. So I was pumping, going to the hospital, pumping, going to the hospital until they were able to latch on. I think like their second week, very gently latching on, and it was so adorable. But
no.
we the breastfeeding journey was definitely more difficult because I was very determined for them to breastfeed exclusively. I was very determined for them to like my milk. And, for those that don't know, when you are breastfeeding, your caloric intake has to skyrocket. Like,
Especially with two.
yeah. So I was taking in like up to like 2,600 calories. Like, it was a lot. And I promise you, I was always hungry, like hungrier than when I was pregnant. Um,
Mm,
but to keep the momentum going, I had
right.
to do that. They eventually started formula probably, I think maybe almost their second month, because I just was not producing enough, obviously for twins, and they were
Mm,
eating literally every 2 hours.
mm,
And it was tough because I was just like, I don't want to give them milk.
yeah.
But, my pediatrician kept saying, the best fed baby or the happiest baby is a best fed baby. So it's not
Right.
just breast.
Right.
And I think we want to reiterate that. I think a lot of times, especially as new mothers, and the parenthood journey is like, if you want something, this is what you want to do, period. But the happiest babies are babies that are fed. So um, I think that is what really, really matters. So always remind yourself that and don't put too much pressure on yourself if you can't produce a lot of milk, if you're not producing the right amount of milk, or if you just decide that you want your baby to be given just formula. There's nothing wrong with that. I know Brittany has a good story of the stigma within, the African American community because I come from a different,
Yes, I was gonna
background.
say that. That's how what I was gonna
So
say.
wild.
And I didn't want to interrupt your
No,
story
go
though,
ahead.
but I think that, you coming from your background of, your Jamaican heritage, you definitely
Yeah.
had a different, like you said, like that's just the way of life. You just feed your baby from breastfeeding, and that's just it.
No stigma, no issues.
Right. I
Yep.
know. When I had my son, I remember being pregnant. My mom was like, what are you planning on doing? And I was like, well,
Hmm.
they're saying that breastfeeding is the best way, like we were
Right.
just talking about. So I was like, I plan on breastfeeding. And my mom was like, well, I didn't breastfeed you or your brother, and y'all turned out fine. So
Did we though? Did we?
and she was like, and her, my mom was born in the 60s. So, like,
Wow, so
my
different.
grandmother didn't actually breastfeed or formula feed. They did, what is it called? Carnation milk out of a can. And
Which
that's just has
I
no new.
I did not know that until we were in that class, and I was like, when I say flabbergasted, I was shocked. I was like, I'm sorry, what? What was you
Right.
saying?
But my mom was
Wow.
saying that, like, it just in their generation, like in my
Yeah,
grandmother's and hers, it was just like, it's nasty. Like, it's just that,
yeah, so
I
frowned
think
upon.
it came from more of a sexual undertone. Like, this is for my
Absolutely.
sexual pleasure, and I can't imagine having babies on them drinking. Like, no,
Patriarchy.
absolutely not. Right. So I had to like really stand up for myself during that
Good.
time when after I had my son and be like, no, like I'm breastfeeding breastfeeding. I mean, not that my mom was like pushy or anything, but like, she
Yeah.
would see me breastfeeding sometimes and she'd be like, ew, like you like you
That's
gonna do
so
that
funny.
here? Like you doing it right here?
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, I had to like it was kind of like doing it and then educating her at the same
Yeah.
time. So I think when it came around to like breastfeeding my daughter, the second time around, like when I came down to having my second baby, my mom was just like, okay, you're gonna breastfeed again, right? And I was like, yeah. And she was like,
Yep.
okay, yeah. And it wasn't more of this like,
Wow.
ew, like you're doing this, like,
What a turnaround.
right. It was just like, okay, and with my daughter, she was born early. She was born 4 weeks early. So, we had a hard time with latching, like actual, like
Yeah.
oh, let me back up. With my son, I breastfed him till he was like 2.5. And I know that was a lot of
Awesome.
stigma around that. Like, people
Yes.
would see and be like, okay, so when you plan on stopping?
Again, get out of my uterus, get out of my bra. May I
And
help
I would be
you?
like, well, I mean, we got a good thing going. Like, why mess up a good thing? I mean, he still eats and eats food and,
Meeting all
and
his
this is good
milestones.
for him. And I can say to this day, he does not get sick. Like everybody else in the household would get sick. He does not, like, he wasn't a sick
Liquid
baby.
gold. Liquid
Right. He
gold.
was not a sick baby at all. Like even now to this day, like he will not, he has, he has a immunity.
Oh my gosh. That is so, now that you're saying it out loud, I'm like, you know what? You are correct. Because even with my twins, Kingston, I breastfed till like a year and a little over a year. Ashton kind of like was over it within like 9 months, 10 months.
Hmm.
And if everybody gets sick, Ashton gets sick the worst every single time. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, gosh, I was like, you know what? You are right. Those couple of months, I think, made a huge difference for him.
Right,
Wow.
right. And then I know with my daughter, she didn't have a good latch. So I
Mm,
ended up pumping, but I think the suction of the pumping over time, I was able to breastfeed her for a year, but I think the over time, like maybe like a couple months after she was a year, my breast just stopped producing milk and I was like distraught. I was like, "Oh my God, like
yeah,
what's
that,
happening?" Like I'm
yes.
supposed to still be producing milk. I'm still pumping. I'm not stressed. But then,
I'm a cow.
you got the cycle of getting stressed because you're not pumping that
And,
causes the
and
less
yes,
production of the milk. And it was a whole
literally.
thing. So I had
Let's,
to like come to terms with like
yeah.
using formula. I mean, at that point, she really didn't need formula. I think I was doing like the toddler milk
I
formula.
was gonna say probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it wasn't like a big deal, but I was like, I had this ideal from my first time, like, no, we're gonna go until like she feels like she's ready and we're gonna be good. And it just wasn't. So, but she's like she stayed so sick. Like, I mean, I was just in the doctor earlier this week with ear
Wow.
infections, like, and she has tubes. So it's just
Oh
like
my God.
I wish
So
that
different.
she would have had that extra time, but it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, that was my journey with breastfeeding in a nutshell. I know with my daughter, pumping and putting in a bottle wasn't necessarily ideal because I mean, I feel like with my son, like I had a really good we had a good bond and connection because like
Yeah.
I would literally put him in the bed and I would get in the bed, I had my t-shirt on. I just raise it up in the middle of the night when he was
Right.
like ready to get his milk. And then I would, whenever he was done, I would pull my shirt back down and roll over.
Right.
Like,
That's it. We are not doing the I'm just laughing because I feel like that is literally how it goes. We just like, okay, all right, good night. We don't have to be warming, finding,
right,
measuring.
right.
That is chaos. Like when I tell you, especially with the twins at night, oh my gosh, it was
Mm-hmm.
the wildest ride in the middle of the night. And I'd be like, just I can tell my husband, I'm like, pass me a baby. I'm like, it doesn't even matter which one it is. Just pass me a baby so I can roll over
Right.
and soothe him because my husband's bringing one downstairs, or we had bought all of the like a lot of the bottle stuff upstairs, so we had like two different bottle stations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the funniest thing to just hear like the chaos of bumping into something, tripping over a toy, and you're like, "Ow, the
And
dog is
then you're
right there."
like cussing in the middle of the night in the dark, like,
How did I stub my toe? Stepping on the dog, the baby crying. You just like,
right, just go to sleep, just go
just
to sleep. All I
go
need
to
is you close your eyes and go to
I
sleep,
beg of
please.
you. I beg of you. Like that is stress alone. So by the time that the morning comes, which is so intense about breast milk, I know you mentioned it
Hmm.
during, kind of telling your experience, is that the thing about breast milk, I think we both learned through our, dual certification, is that there are different times that your breast milk actually come in a lot more than others.
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking to yourself, like, oh, well, it should be about the same. Not true. For
Mm-hmm.
for some people, it's the middle of the afternoon you'll get your most. Some it's the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to remember that and give yourself grace because that stress of not making enough is stress to keep
Yes.
it
Oh my
low as
gosh.
well.
Yes, I was just having a conversation with one of my friends that had her baby. Her baby will be one in a few weeks actually.
Wow.
But she was like, I remember she had, and I recognized it in myself in her when she called me and we were having this conversation. She was like, okay, like Brittany, what am I gonna do? She's getting bigger. And she was like, she's gonna take more milk, therefore I need to be making more. So like, should I add
Mhm.
pumping on in
Exactly.
between nursing? And I was like, I explained to her, I was like, nursing, I mean, breastfeeding, that's like a biofeedback loop. So the more you pump or the more you express out that milk, the
Exactly.
more your body's gonna make, because your body's like, oh, you need more. So it's like a straight like biofeedback loop. And
Exactly.
I was like, if you're just know, if you start pumping more in between feeding, you're going to have to keep that up, because or
Correct.
else you're going to end up with like, things
Leaking.
like mastitis or,
Yes.
leaking, stuff like that. So like, just knowing that that's going to have to be like, a continual thing that you're going to do. And like, but I recognized when she was having that conversation, I was like, I used to be like that. I used to be like, oh my God, like he's
Yeah.
getting bigger and like, I'm gonna have to make more. And like, don't even talk about leaving the baby anywhere overnight or anything like that, or going back to work. I was just like, how is this supposed to work? Like, I'm supposed
It
to
is.
have money and
Lit-
I said milk. I said money. I'm supposed to
That
have
too.
milk and money. Like, I mean, let's be real. Like, I'm supposed to
That
have enough
too.
milk to go to work for an 8-hour day and
Yep.
then come home and I mean, I have to start somewhere. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, I'm gonna have to have some. I'm I'm gonna have to have some
Literally.
milk to give to someone to like go to work. So like, how does
Exactly.
that work? And I just had to let go of a lot of the thoughts that I had, because I mean,
Yep.
like you said, fed baby is the best baby, right? So like,
Yeah.
if I had to supplement with a little bit of formula, like I had to learn that that's okay. It is okay.
Yep.
It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, because sometimes the way that it's framed, sometimes people start thinking like, oh
Absolutely.
my God, is something wrong with me? I'm a bad person, like I
I'm a
shouldn't,
bad
it's all the
mom.
right, I'm a bad mom, all these internalized thoughts you get from that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I think definitely touching on the the aspect of going back to work and being like, I love that, the chicken or the egg, which comes first? Because you're like, I'm exhausted. I pumped like 4 different times. Like the most unnerving call or text message you can get is whether it's from a babysitter or family member, whoever's watching the baby, and they're like, they're down to like their last pump.
Absolutely.
Did you leave? Is there anything in the freezer? I'm like, I don't think so. Check. And I'm like, okay, don't worry. I'm on my way home. Or, you know, you,
Absolutely.
and I think what we have to realize is, like you said, give ourselves grace, but also really come up with a breastfeeding plan and
Hmm.
what's your ideal situation, depending, of course, on how your milk is coming in,
Mm.
because you can be able, I know some people, they can literally, they are literally cows. I had a
Right, they
friend
could
who,
just make it right.
yeah, I had a friend who had twins literally around the same time that I had my twins. They were actually, our due dates were a week apart, and her twins came super early, so they were micro preemies.
Mm.
And they were 25 weekers, so that's how
Oh
small they
wow,
were.
they were tiny.
They were tiny, and she produced so much milk. I think literally as of So the twins are now a little over 2. I think that she just finished her like freezer, like one of the freezer milks.
Oh, wow.
So she was just pumping nonstop. And I'm like, girl, how did you get all that? She's like, I don't know. It just started coming out. And that pressure and that stress of being like, I'm not gonna have enough. It's
Right.
it's a lot. But
Right.
there are a lot of formulas as well on the market now that I am so thankful for that we're able to get formula from overseas, thanks in part to the pandemic. Because the FDA was not allowing different formula brands, bureaucracy as well. But I think what makes it better is that now we have a plethora of formulas besides the ones that were on the market literally less than 2 years ago. So you have from the UK, Ireland, Switzerland, I think Germany. So
And
there are so many
even
of them.
what you mentioned about donor milk, like I didn't know that
Yes,
until my daughter was born and she was in the NICU. And I remember the first day they were like, first of all, that's a whole nother podcast episode talking about the
add
NICU
that to the list.
experience.
Add that
I'm
to
gonna
the
write that
list.
down because that's
Yes.
a whole different like ball game experience. But I didn't
Ooh,
know when I was supposed to come, like I didn't know, like, am I like supposed to just walk into the NICU?
right,
Like, or like how does this work? So,
right,
they're like, "Yeah, we were waiting on you to come." Like, I had neglected my baby or whatever. Anywho,
right. Rude.
they were like, "Yeah, we ended up giving her donor milk because she was
Mm,
hungry." And I mean, that was it was fine because I think the nurse that came down and was like, "This form is for donor milk in case you need to use donor milk. Are you
okay,
okay with that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with that."
okay.
But I didn't know that that was an option. I didn't know that they had
Right,
donor milk stored. I think
right,
it's not necessarily widely talked about because they don't want people just to be like, "Oh yeah, go get the donor breast milk," because I know breast milk is better, but I don't want to breastfeed. So like,
right, right. That is true.
um,
That's true. But it's good because at first I was totally apprehensive about that. I was just like, donor
mhm.
milk. I was like, who are these people? You
Right,
know?
yeah. I mean, I
And then
worked through all of that, because I
yeah,
had the same like, wait a minute, is it safe? Like,
sterile, yeah. I'm like, there's so many antibodies that can be passed through breast milk because
right,
it's a bodily fluid. Um, so, a lot of the nurses reassured me that this is the same procedures and process that they use if they are giving someone donor blood. Like, they're
right.
checking for HIV or any positive test on anything that could hurt or harm or infections for the baby. So, so yeah, I think I don't know. Do you have anything about? I was gonna say I want to give a little bit more about formula, but my brain is in pregnancy mode right now.
I just remember there being so many options for formula and I didn't know like because it was something that I did on my own. So I
Yes,
didn't necessarily know like which one to choose. Do I choose the soy or do I choose, I kind of I'm lactose sensitive. So like would my baby be lactose
right.
sensitive? Should I
Like
do
same,
soy or should I do regular? I
same.
know the formula changed the poop consistency. So I was like, "Oh my
Oh
God,
yes,
my baby's like constipated now." Like
right. What are these pebbles?
like
100%, 100%. And so many African Americans or people of color, period, we are lactose intolerant. Like
right.
the numbers are double, if not triple, depending on your ethnicity, to be lactose intolerant. So keep that in mind as well if you're looking for formula. Is maybe it is soy-based might be better. Obviously, connecting with your pediatrician and your midwife as well. And sometimes you do have to try a lot of different formulas or different types of formulas before one is a good fit for you and baby.
The last thing that I'll add is that at least I found it helpful that some of the formula companies do send samples in the mail for you to try
Oh,
before having to
yes,
buy the whole big container, but and then your
yes,
baby tries it and it's allergic or can't have that one, you
right.
know.
Good point. Good
So I
point.
did I did enjoy that, like not having to like be like, okay, let's buy this whole container and it doesn't work.
Yes, right. You can just fill out the form online, so it's super easy. Yep.
Right, right. Okay, that concludes today's episode.
Yes.
Stay tuned for future episodes. We're definitely going to do the NICU experience because I did not realize that we both have our own NICU stories
What
to
a
talk
mess.
about. So I definitely want to get that in and talk about that because, a lot of our families and people in our that look like us go through that with the NICU and
Absolutely.
everything. And, it's good to highlight some of the things that we've experienced to like help other people, you know, prepare or think about these things as they're, going through their journeys with their babies. So I think that would be
Absolutely.
awesome.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that one too.
All right. Thank you guys. Talk to
Take
you later.
care.